25 is as I think you all know, is, Jesus said, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was in prison, you visited me. What you did for the least of these, you did for me. And I remember for several years, it struck me that Jesus would not have said that Bill is worth less than Stephanie, or Aaliyah on this call is worth less than David. Jesus wouldn't have said that. Maimonides wouldn't have said that. Buddha wouldn't have said that. Muhammad wouldn't have said that. So a friend of mine, my wife's best friend's her best friend's wife, her best friend's wife is a pastor at a UCC church in Cleveland. And she gave me a copy of a different translation of the Bible. It was called the Poverty and Justice Bible. And Matthew 25 goes like this: when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. What you did for those who seemed less important, you did for me. And think of the difference, what you did for those who seem less important versus what you did for the least of these. And it just tells me the relationship we all, in a community sort of way, should have with each other. And that's kind of how I was brought up, and why I'm interested in issues like child tax credit. And the child tax credit, we've been working on this for 8 years. So it was, you had said slipped into the American Rescue Plan. I don't know if slipped in suggests some Bill middle of the night shenanigans. It was actually something I've been working on for 8 years. Initially, I went to the chair of the senior Democrat of the Finance Committee, and we then built support until we had ultimately Joe Biden in this campaign talking about it, and virtually every Democratic senator on board. And in the end, this passed, the whole package, and the child tax credit passed 51-50. Every Democrat voted for it, every Republican voted against it, and it shouldn't have been that way, but it was. But it's so we passed this in March. I remember saying to the Senator Casey sits next to me, and we had been in session for 13 hours. It was March 6th. It was a Saturday noonish, 12:30, something like that. And I turned to Casey and say, "This is the best day of my career, because we're going to cut the child poverty rate by 40% because of this bill." And the challenge obviously is to make it permanent. We've got it for 1 year in the law now. And what this means, and anything in Congress, you can pass it, but you got to make it happen after you pass it. And I started calling directly, immediately, Janet Yellen, Secretary of the Treasury, because we want this tax, this is a refundable tax credit. So regardless of what your tax liability is, you are eligible. 92% of Ohio children are eligible. The families of 92% of Ohio children, to be more precise. And we wanted to make sure, rather than one lump sum, this was available monthly. So starting July 15th this year, and we were not sure at all the IRS could do it that quickly, that Treasury would get them to, and that IRS would do something that they hadn't done before to make this portal available, so that if you paid your taxes in 2019, if you filed a return in 2019 or 2020, you would automatically get the $250 or $300 a month, depending on the age of your children, per child. If you didn't, you can go to the IRS portal, childtaxcredit.gov, and sign up. And so, whether you work in legal aid, like legal services, like Stephanie does, I particularly call her out because my daughter works for ABLE out of Toledo, legal services, doing immigration work. And I know how legal aid is so important in our country, in our justice system. But starting this July 15th, the checks will begin monthly. Again, if you're 6 or under, or under 6. I think it's under 6, you're $300 a month. If you're 6 and over, I think 6 is in the smaller category, the lesser dollar category, it's $250 a month per child. So with the whole idea that hard work just doesn't pay off in our country like it used to for so many people. I did a roundtable on the dignity of work back in maybe a month and a half ago, through my chairmanship of the Banking Housing Committee. And a woman from Southern West Virginia said, working and poor shouldn't be words that are together. And she had been somebody that has clearly worked hard her whole life. I don't know how old she was. She probably looked older than she was because of the difficulty of decade after decade of barely making it with the hard work she does and the low income she has. And this is all the child tax credit coupled with the earned income tax credit, coupled with, I hope, what we do with a much higher minimum wage will make healthcare pay off more. But I mean, we'll make hard work pay off more. So I'll just close with this, and I think we can take a couple questions if you want to do that. I was talking to Ohio mother from Cleveland the other day, and she said she's going to use the child tax credit to pay for childcare. I mean, where there's a whole lot of things that this will mean, whether it's diapers, whether it's maybe getting to take the kids out to eat at a diner once every so often. We've got to have the tax system come down to these people, and these are such important tax credits. They benefit, as I said, they're 92% of Ohio kids are eligible. Making it refundable was the most important thing we did. So if you don't have tax liability, you get this money as a refund. At the same time, one of the next steps after trying to make this permanent is to help the unbanked with our federal about a quarter of Americans are unbanked. And as you know, it costs more to be poor in this country. It means that people so often they got to pay, payday lenders, and they pay people to cash their checks and all the things that they do when you're poor. And our federal accounts bill that we are pushing through the Banking Housing Committee. I'm hopeful we can do it this year. We don't have the kind of bipartisan support we want yet, but will mean that people can go to the post office and have a bank account there, or go to a local credit union, or go to a local bank in Cincinnati or Dayton or Hamilton or Middletown or wherever, and get that kind of service. So I'll stop there and turn it back to Mr. Woods. And if anybody for a couple minutes has questions, I'd be glad to stick around for a little while and do that, for comments that I should hear. So thank you, and thanks for your role and doing the work that is so important in this society.
One quick question for you, Senator. Sure. We've got this for a year, so July to next June, basically. And then,
well, yes. I mean, the bill passed starting in July 15th. That will go 12 months. And I can't imagine. I mean, the Biden budget, whatever bill we pass next, will include at least a 5-year extension. I cannot imagine that even Republicans who oppose the child tax credit, they say things like, we can't afford it. We could afford a tax cut 4 years ago where 70% of the benefits went to the richest 1%, but we can't afford these dollars. It's not small numbers of dollars. We can't afford dollars for low-income families. I mean, I just don't buy that. I think the embarrassment of ending it after a year will mean that Republicans that oppose it would be embarrassed to end it after a year. So we've got to affirmatively move. It ends by itself unless we extend it. But my commitment, Biden's commitment, Schumer's commitment, Pelosi's commitment is at least 5 years. And I would expect, we will fight like hell to make it permanent.
That's good. Other quick questions for the senator?
So this is Stephanie at Legal Aid, and I'm here with David Wavrash, who in fact helps run our low-income tax clinic. And we just first want to thank you on behalf of all of our clients. This is so incredibly important. And just like you said, 8 years that it took to get it, you've known so long how much our families need this in Ohio. What can we do to help? What can all of us on this call as legal aid attorneys do to help you, Senator, make this permanent?
No, I thank you for that, Stephanie, and David. Thank you. I think you tell stories. I mean, I would like Shabbat and Davidson and Portman and other members of Congress. I mean, no member of Congress, nobody that represents you in the federal government where you live, except for me, is voted for the child tax credit extension. Or filed child tax credit expansion. Rob may have voted for this years ago as part of a bigger package, but he didn't vote for the expansion. He didn't vote for the refundability, and he didn't vote for the monthly dispersal. So I think you tell them about your clients, right? Call them, write them, tell them how this affects real people. Talk about, somebody that when I hear people say, I've heard a lot of politicians and some other people say, you know, this $300 a month unemployment just makes people sit home. They're not going to work because of it. Well, the reason most, I mean, I got an email from a woman who is a regular rider on Sorta, on your bus system. And she said, when I've been working with Sorta to get more money to them, Vice President Harris came to Cincinnati a month ago, and I set it up to talk about this and to get more help. And, you know, business community's been good in Cincinnati getting, you know, for the levy and all the expanding Sorta. But this woman said she works Sundays. In her neighborhood, there's not bus service on Sundays. She makes about $11 or $12 an hour, and she had to do Uber or take a taxi on Sunday, and that was essentially about half of her income. But she couldn't not work Sunday because she'd lose her job. So I tell stories like that, what this child tax credit and earned income tax credit mean to your clients, that some of them aren't going back to work because they don't have bus service. They're not going back to work because they can't find childcare or they can't afford childcare. People want to work. The great majority of people want to work. People, low-income people, the working poor work harder, frankly, than probably any of us on this call, and have so little to show for it. And I just think the more you can relate those stories to Davidson and Shabbat and Portman and who am I leaving out? The other half of the Cincinnati, of the other Hamilton, the Hamilton County East and Claremont. I'm forgetting his name, but anyway. You know, tell them these stories, and I think they particularly if you can reach them personally, it could really matter. But you could collect so many stories from your clients, Stephanie and David at Legal Services. So, well, thank you all, and thanks for the work you're all doing and making a difference in so many people's lives. And all of you, I'm really, really appreciative of that, and stay in touch with us. And Aaliyah, you met Chad Bolt. Chad works in Washington. Aaliyah Brown runs our Cincinnati operation, but she's also our assistant state director and is in the middle of all of these decisions. We talk all the time about, you know, what we're doing in Ohio, and stay in touch with both Aaliyah and Chad, if you would, and me. All right?
There are a couple of questions in chat.
Oh, sure. If you can go ahead.
Well, my question was, what would banking reform or accessibility look like for the unbanked? And the other question that ended up in the chat was, are undocumented families included in this new piece, the child care credit?
Undocumented families are not. I think that's true in every case, right, Chad? Chad?
Hey, sorry about that. I was coming off mute. Yeah, unfortunately, that is correct. Prior to the 2017 tax law, actually, children with ITINs did qualify for the child tax credit. You probably know this, but the 2017 tax law for the first time required a social security number. Barring any changes, that will stop being in effect again in 2025. But we are pushing to make ITIN kids eligible.
And that's obviously hard to do in this Congress. The other question about Fed accounts, if we can pass this bill, and I don't know exactly what form it will take, it will essentially mean that anybody's entitled to open what's called a federal account. It will be sponsored, underwritten by the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve, people don't think much about this, but the Federal Reserve provides all kinds of subsidies to our banking system and the financial services, the whole banking system, where, you know, profits are pretty gargantuan, all have some direct, indirect, mostly indirect subsidies from the Federal Reserve. And when people say, well, you're doing these Fed accounts, taxpayers, Federal Reserve has to back them up. Well, that's minor compared to what it does with the big guys. It would simply mean that anybody could go to the post office, a local bank, a local credit union. They would have a federal bank account with the general services that a bank account can provide with check cashing. So in other words, they could go to the post office or go to the bank or go online and wouldn't have to pay a payday lender for a short-term loan. If they had money in their account, they wouldn't have to pay for check cashing. When you're a low-wage worker and you've got to pay to cash your paycheck, it's pretty demoralizing and saps the little bit of help that you have. And we want to, that's all part of this in my mind. So, and ideally these we can pass this, the child tax credits then are deposited directly in your Fed account. That $250 per child or $300 per child. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. Good to be with all of you. And thanks for the work everybody does.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll keep in touch. And thank you for all the work you're doing.
All right. Thanks. It's my honor to get to do it. Thanks so much. See ya.
I think, can Chad Bolt stay with us? And I know we have Stephanie Mose of Cincinnati or Southwest Ohio Legal Aid, who's our local person who's been focusing on this issue to continue this discussion after the senator leaves us. And then Chad, you're very knowledgeable about the current legislation. So why don't we take it from here? Stephanie, why don't you come in for a little bit and give us your perspective on the child tax credit?
So I think David really is here as the one here at Legal Aid who's been working so much on our tax issues and can really talk to families that are coming in. I just really want to share with the senator's staff, this is incredibly valuable. The stimulus checks, but then this, the needs of our families are so great right now as they're coming out of this pandemic hardship and trying to get back to work, trying to get back to having their kids in school. Unfortunately, there's just been increases in expenses across the board for families. And unlike, families at higher income levels who have flexibility, discretionary money that they can cut out an expense, when you look at the budgets of our families, there's no room to cut. So when gas prices, food prices, other things go up, this money is what makes them be able to afford remaining housed, afford to remaining having food for their kids. One of the pieces that we're struggling with here in Greater Cincinnati and Southwest Ohio is just the increase in housing costs. And as homeownership becomes less and less affordable, harder for our families to get into, having this additional money means that we're still allowing opportunities for particularly minority families. Here we've experienced a huge loss of African-American families. This money means maybe the difference between them being able to at some point buy a home or not, as we work on expanding again, trying to expand African-American homeownership. For many of our tenants, there's across the board rent increases that are starting to happen. And again, just making sure that there's that little bit of extra money to keep children out of poverty, to keep families housed is so important right now. But I wanted to quickly, Bill, if it's okay, turn it over to David and just talk a little bit about what he's seen in our clinic, which works directly with people coming on tax issues. And I don't know if David has any questions for Chad about the continuation of this or any thoughts, but go ahead, David.
Yeah. Thanks, Stephanie. And again, Chad, thank you for your staff's effort on this. I mean, really, from our perspective here at the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic, we're the boots on the ground. We get to see what this money means to the clients. Just like Stephanie said, I mean, with the costs increasing across the board, this is the difference between being able to stay housed for many of our clients, putting food on the table for them, for their children, especially coming off the heels of this pandemic. This money means more now than it ever did to folks. And unfortunately, what we're seeing here is there is sometimes a disconnect between clients being able to get this money because they haven't filed a tax return since, it's 2017, 2016, if they didn't have a filing requirement. I think one of the questions I have here is there an opportunity here, to provide more funding to the IRS or to provide some sort of support service for folks? A lot of times they'll come to the Low Income Taxpayer Clinic and we can help them, but it requires cooperation along with the IRS to be able to communicate with their staff, who right now are, I believe, still working from home. And so one of the questions I have is, if this is a possibility of moving forward, is there an ability to have some funding go towards support services with the IRS, which is also a critical component for folks who should have the ability to access these funds, but are not currently receiving that or eligible to?
Sure, I can take that one if you want. I mean, when we passed the American Rescue Plan that had the expansion of the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit in it, we knew that we were giving the IRS a considerable amount of work to do on top of what they were already handling, following years and years of budget cuts. So, in addition to the expansion of the credits, we also included, I forget the exact number, but a couple $100 billion extra for IRS, or maybe it was about $100 billion, to handle the additional workload. And so IRS has hired a few thousand additional people to answer the phone, specifically to answer questions about the child tax credit. They've set up a couple of different online tools for people to understand and access the credit. The non-filer portal in particular is there to help people who don't typically file a tax return have access to the credit. It essentially, I mean, maybe the person using it doesn't know this, but on the back end, it essentially creates a simplified return so that they can get the credit. The portal is functional. It is not, there's a little bit more work to do and making it particularly to make it more mobile friendly, which we know is really important, because when you get into issues like the digital divide and access to the internet, we know that for so many folks, the only access that they don't have a computer at home. The only access they have is their mobile device. So we are pushing the IRS to make the portal better and make it more mobile friendly so that people can use it on their mobile device. But the important thing is that it's up and running. And I know that as we get closer to July 15th, they're going to continue trying to make improvements to it. The non-filer portal right now is only available in English, which of course it doesn't really do the trick for someone who doesn't have proficiency in English. So we're pushing the IRS to add additional languages. I think we both recognize that the IRS has had a considerable amount of work to do pursuant to the rescue plan, whether it was implementing tax changes made literally in the middle of filing season, getting the third round of economic impact payments out, 160 million EIPs out to folks, and particularly reaching hard to reach populations, and then also getting this portal up and running. So there's definitely more work to do, don't get me wrong there, but the good news is it's available, and there's a place for people to go who don't typically file with a portal that should get them access to the payments.
So, yeah, and as a kind of a follow-up question to that too, a lot of the clients that we see in the low-income taxpayer clinic here don't have a filing requirement because they're under that income threshold, they have disability, or they're looking to get on disability, which itself is a very long process. And usually the first step in resolving a lot of these problems is to file a tax return. And in essence, and I think you touched on this earlier, is on the back end of that portal, it does create that $1 return for 2019 or 2020 respectively. Do you have a sense that that filing portal can be kind of fleshed out so that that remains a permanent feature? Because a lot of the folks, filing a tax return itself is a solution in and of itself, but it's inaccessible for most. And that portal kind of bridges that divide there. So I'm curious to see if there's any thought as to making that a permanent fixture, especially if these tax credits if there's a push to make them permanent.
I'm glad you asked. Senator Brown has actually thought the same thing at a hearing last year with the IRS commissioner in the finance committee, which Senator Brown is a member of. We asked him about the non-filer portals that IRS was setting up. And in response to Senator Brown's questions, Commissioner Rettig called the non-filer portals the, quote, future of the IRS. So we want to hold him to that. I think we're fairly pleased with the work of the IRS commissioner. Again, like I said, particularly in light of all the new work that Congress has given the IRS to do over the past year and a half. But we definitely want to explore that and hold him to that because just as you said, this is, whether they know it or not, these folks are using the portal to create a simplified return. And it seems to me that we could do that so that they can, have access to the advanced child tax credit payment for which they're eligible. But we could also do that for them just as a means of this is an easy way to file a tax return if you need. So yeah, we will keep pushing them on that.
Stephanie, getting back to your initial question to Senator Brown about what we can do, you know, I think he answered one question that we have almost a year with which to work here, but I think his comment about us relating stories to our representatives. Any other thoughts you have, Chad Bold, about what people can do at the local level to, you know, make this permanent?
Yeah, I definitely think it is what the senator said about sharing stories, because they are, I just think, you know, super compelling evidence of just how needed and necessary this is. Both with members who need some additional persuasion, but also with members who are already on board. I mean, the you know, the senator talked at a roundtable on Monday with a mom, and he shared with you earlier that she told him, you know, she'd be using you know, the advanced child tax credit payments so that she could afford childcare, so that she could go back to work for her family. And he heard that story Monday morning. He repeated it, you know, Tuesday night when he was on Chris Hayes. You know, we'll probably use it in future times when he's on the Senate floor. Because those the stories of people with lived experience, the actual real life concrete examples of the difference this is making is really compelling, and you know, we can use it to make the case for permanence. And then I guess the other way, there was another suggestion that I had come up with too. Oh, just use your own you know, whatever platforms you have, whether it's your social media or just like your real life connections with folks in the community, just to spread the word and make sure as many people know about this as possible. I mean, the majority of people are going to see, are going to start getting the advanced CTC payments direct deposited into their accounts, having taken no action at all. And that's good. So one, I guess the job to do there is make sure that they understand like what the payment is and why they're getting it. But also for folks who don't typically file a return, just you can help us, you know, spread the word to make sure as many people are eligible, actually, you know, get in touch with the IRS, use the non-filer portal so that they can get connected with these payments, because that helps us make the case. The more, you know, the more people who are eligible and actually receive the payments, that helps us make the case for permanence too, because that's, you know, more people who know about it, more people who benefited from it, and it all adds up to the same, all points in the same direction, which is that we should make these permanent.
Stephanie, you have some other thoughts about this issue?
No, Bill, Chad, I really appreciate you just hearing some of the ideas David had and everything else. I don't know. I would love, Bill, to hear what other people might think in the group. I know we've got a good group of people here, and other people have other suggestions, but Chad, we're certainly going to take here at Legal Aid, we'll take your suggestions and the senators on ways to increase the visibility of this, make sure that we're getting the good stories out. Certainly, if we have clients willing to share their stories with your office, we'll send them your direction, because I think that can be powerful. So thank you for those ideas. Great.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I do apologize. I need to excuse myself. I have another Zoom at 12:30. So I need to jump Zoom windows, but it was really good to be with all of you today, and just reiterate the senator's thanks for all of the work that you're doing. It makes such an incredible difference in people's lives, and it's great to be in partnership with you. So let's keep in touch, and I'll talk to you all soon.
Yeah, we will stay in touch, and thank you very much for your input and knowledge about this. And
my pleasure.
Need to push it forward.
Thanks all.
In terms of adding to the discussion here, it just seems like such an opportune time for us, because we've been having almost years and years of bad news, that we're going to have a program to work with here that's going to add additional money to people's income that will help them pay rent, help them pay childcare, help them do many basic things that they're often not able to do. And so it behooves all of us that are working on this area to get those stories out there, because we've had so much bad news. I mean, right now there's a call going on about affordable housing and what to do next about that, because that issue went down to defeat at the May primary. So there's another effort by Council Member Chris Seelbach to put something else on the ballot, maybe in November. But part of the problem, of course, with affordable housing is not having sufficient income to pay the rent. And so here we suddenly have a new source of revenue for an awful lot of people, especially if we can get the word out and get them to utilize this. Any other thoughts that others have about that? I know your legal aid works directly with so many clients that find themselves in this kind of situation, and the pandemic has only made things worse for so many people. So this is a piece of good news to work with. Any other thoughts you had, David?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I can't really overstate the importance of this child tax credit to a lot of our families. It does generate a lot of work. And I think one of the issues that I could potentially foresee here is just getting the word out to folks, because the answer is fairly simple, is file that tax return, get on the non-filer tool to do that. And so I think kind of the cornerstone to making this really successful is also just that effort of saying, here's how you can get this started. Just file that return. That's either, through the volunteer income tax assistance sites that is put on through here in the greater Cincinnati area. That's a national program. It's a free tax preparation program that can be raised more in its visibility. Training staff at community organizations about how to use this non-filer tool. I've used it myself. It's fairly straightforward. It takes maybe 15-20 minutes to do. But really getting the awareness out there, I think, is going to be the thing that makes this all work. It's going to be the thing that generates the stories. It's going to be the thing that generates the data. And ultimately, those things are going to be the things that make a compelling argument for the extension of all of this. So none of that's possible without getting these folks in the doors, filing, and getting this money out to them, connecting them to that. So I think, the work of community organizations is going to be incredibly critical to getting this extended out and also made permanent.
Bill, one of the things that I've been wondering about is whether or not the current affordable housing providers, housing stock providers like Mary Burke and Over the Rhine Housing Network might be a place where, with a little intensive effort, you could make sure everybody got signed up, and Mary could make, I'm sure, a double dozen lovely stories about people who suddenly could afford to rent and the changes it makes in their lives. And it's something you alluded to. I mean, affordable housing has got two pieces to it. One is the cost of housing. The other is the amount of revenue or income that people have to pay for their housing. And so whether you're raising the river or lowering the bridge to close that gap, it would be interesting to know if anybody's taken on any kind of research to see what this short-term piece might have in terms of an effect on the affordable housing numbers, as say those needing affordable housing. So it's just I've got a note to give Mary a call and see whether she's got staff that can work with their people or where they are on. I would imagine they're probably on top of it.
No, that's a good point, because I think groups like her housing group can both get people onto the rolls and also have stories about how that's affected affected their ability to pay some rent, that kind of thing. So that's a good suggestion. Katie Hines was briefly on this call, but I think she had the Affordable Housing Trust Fund call at noon as well. But her group, the Center for Community Change, is also working nationally and through Ohio on this issue. So we'll have to keep in touch with her. But she was very excited that we were doing this forum today, because I don't think this tax credit is sufficiently known, because it did slip through there in this big March package, legislative package, COVID relief package. And so as great as this issue is, I think we really need to continue to spread the word about it. Other thoughts others of you have? Or we can break up early, let you all have lunch. Any further thoughts?
Scott Christensen, you had your hand up for a moment. Did you have a question or a thought to add to this?
Thank you. I texted David directly and I got his contact information, which is what I wanted, to ask him to be a speaker at the Greater Cincinnati Democrats. They have a Tuesday lunch, and I'm scheduling at the end of August, or end of July and in August. And then after that, we'll be having candidates, but every Tuesday at noon, we're still on Zoom. So it's just a group that would like to know about this. They want to know what's going on. And I think, like somebody just said, it's just not very well known. Thank you.
Any last minute thoughts from you, Stephanie or David?
David, go ahead, David.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say for community organizations that have regular contact with the clients that this would make the biggest difference for, I'd be really interested in seeing if there's an appetite to partner for, trainings on how to use this non-filer portal, coming up with some materials that we could even distribute, because for as much work as our low-income taxpayer clinic does here, we're limited to the Cincinnati area, and there's only so many of us that can go around and do this. And so I think, being able to have community partners, do some of this work, I think is going to be incredibly valuable. I'm happy to, help however I can to make sure that organizations have the ability to reach the correct folks with the correct way to do this, and just raise that visibility and collect stories. I think collaboration here is going to be really key.
Very good point. Yeah. And probably you would add the same thing, Stephanie, as well, right?
Right. No, absolutely. And I think what I would say is if there are people on this call today, reach out to Legal Aid, David or me, if you've got one of our contact information, or just call our main number. If you do have people who are struggling, that need help, the low-income clinic here can assist that. And this will be something Legal Aid continues to work on, and to make sure we're collecting the stories from our clients too.
I'm not sure whether we had anybody on from the Free Store Food Bank, but they would have lots of clients. I would think that, this whole issue of food insecurity shows the income is a real critical issue for somebody. Well,
Isn't there a collaborative of the food pantries that work with the Free Store? They get a lot of their food from the Free Store, but isn't there a collaborative group of food pantry leaders who would benefit from that?
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, I think there is a besides the food bank that they do have some other outlying outfits that they work with.
Yeah, I think it'd be great.
Okay. Well, we're contemplating also going back to having live forums in the fall, where as issues come up, we may do a few more forums this summer, but we'll be back full tilt in September after Labor Day, having forums every other Thursday. And we'll certainly want to return to this important issue in the coming year as we get more information to make this permanent. And those of you, and I think what we're also planning to do is probably combine Zoom and live forums together so that people can tune in by Zoom. Some of us are getting zoomed out or over zoomed these days, and anxious to get back to some live meetings. But I think it also provides a great tool, like our ability to get Senator Brown for 15 or 20 minutes today from Washington to talk about this. So
Bill,
anyway,
one other thought. Would you share what your calendar when you've got it set up, for fall and that kind of thing, but with community shares, and ask them to share it with all of their agencies?
sure. Very good idea.
Both staff, but more than staff, just somebody from a lot of these agencies ought to hear a lot of this information.
Good, very good. That's a great suggestion, Don. Well, we can let you all have some lunch. That's one good thing about the forums at Christ, when they're live at Christ Church Cathedral. You can either bring your lunch or buy a lunch there. Here you have to starve yourself or secretly eat while you're having this go on. So thanks all. Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.